Have you ever met someone who felt fun and exciting to be with, and then later you find that their attitudes and behaviors are triggering you? That trigger isn't about them, it's actually telling you really powerful things about yourself. The beliefs and patterns you've been conditioned with create the relationship that you have to yourself and the meanings that you make about the experiences in your life. In this excerpt of a client session, I unpack this to help you understand how your self-concept affects the way that you experience your specific person and everything else in the world, from money, career, to friendships, or even what you believe is possible for you.
You have to find what feels right for you. Like I said, a lot of people go in and they mistake, this is a thing that'll make it happen. So they go in and they do it, and then when they aren't seeing the results, they're experiencing the same frustration. So the first thing I want you to do is to note what has been working, because I know it's really hard to see the label from the inside of the jar. And so from the outside, I hear all sorts of little stories about like, this is changing and this is changing and this is changing. And then, but when you tell the story, nothing is changing. Is it possible to see someone in a certain way? Because we're always projecting our own self onto others. And therefore, is it possible to have a positive self-concept in the way that you want and him still showing up in the way that you don't want? I mean, the people that do all these like amazing things, they can just let it go. They're not focused on the time that it's been. So I want you to question your attachment to not only the amount of time that it's taken, but the amount of time that it might take. There's some resistance in there. But for the moment, in order to create the intimacy, you have to be able to see that it's already coming. This is sort of an example of, do you know when I say like we go and do the techniques and then look around and it's not happening? When is it going to happen? It doesn't work like that. You're operating the internal system, so you have to see all the ways that it's happening in order to speed it up, in order not to stay sort of stuck. And in the case of when there's no contact, that's where the entire work of that is internal. In theory, it depends. Can you get over your internal, like, it's the people tell stories about, I mean, in my mind it's easier, but only because I've experienced it from both sides. And but it's essentially when it's no contact, you're entirely working against your own internal resistance and all the stories that you have about that based on your experience of reality from that space. Here, you have it in your life, and now you're working against your own internal resistance based on the stories you have of your own circumstances. And so just without like really putting you on the spot, can you come up with 5 things that have shifted and changed, that have moved in a more positive direction? Because this is the kind of self-concept I'm talking about. I'm not talking about your psychological self-concept. I'm talking about your subconscious self-concept, which is derived of how you feel about any situation. And from there, you're going to project that feeling onto the other person. You're going to start telling a story about them. And so when I question whether that's even possible, that's what I mean. I'm not talking about how great we think we are, because the ego sort of only sees this much. Yep, how you feel about yourself in relationship to any environmental situation. So how you see yourself in this situation. Maxwell Maltz has a quote, and I think I've said it before, and I'm not going to get it verbatim, but it's basically like the human being will never act outside of how they think and feel about themselves or how they see themselves in any environment. And so I am sure you can go into an environment and you can feel sexy, you can feel desirable. Can you bring that to this environment? That's what I'm talking about, self-concept. That's entirely an internal workings situation. Are you here? Like, do you see kind of what I'm talking about now? When we talk about identity or self-concept, it's, language is so inadequate for this, to describe this, explain this work, because there's so many gaps in ways to describe it. And so it's like, do you remember the story you told about being in that clothing store? I think it was a clothing store. You just, you got that sensation and you were like, this is it. So that is a way of experiencing yourself. You're thinking it's just a feeling, but it's actually a way of experiencing yourself. And it's just a matter of, that one will pass too, but you can hold that, you can cultivate that. And so I want you to question that self-concept. So if that's how you see him, what do you have to believe about yourself in order to see him through that lens? Yeah, so then I want to go back to question the original idea of how self-concept can be separate from the people outside of you. Everything works like this. Everything in life.